All right. Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for the St. Croix Regional session of Wisconsin Water Week. My name is Kate Wright, and I work for the St. Croix River Association, and I'll be moderating this session today. So welcome to the What to Expect When You're Expecting a CAFO, the perspective of a small town faced with a large hog CAFO wanting to locate within its borders session. Today's session features 4 distinguished speakers, and our presenters will discuss their work, and after which we will then take your questions. As an audience, please be sure to type your questions in the Q&A box and upvote those questions that you really want answered. Today's speakers include Frederick Painter. Frederick is a college educator, a business attorney, publisher, Lake Association Vice President, organic gardener, educational nonprofit, director of communication. We have Howie Pahl. Howie's a longtime resident of Trade Lake, Wisconsin. He grew up in the heart of Iowa's CAFO country. Mr. Pahl has a BS in industrial arts education from UW Stout and currently makes his living as a cabinet maker. He's an avid camper, canoeer, and fisherman. Ramona Moody is a lifelong resident of Burnett County and currently serves as Burnett County's District 4 Supervisor Representative and is running for the position of chairperson of the Town of Trade Lakes Board in the upcoming spring election. We also have Andrew Marshall. Mr. Marshall is a shareholder with the Bassford Remele law firm in Minneapolis. He has more than 34 years of trial experience representing a wide spectrum of clients in commercial, construction, employment litigation, as well as personal injury claims. Everyone, please join me in welcoming our speakers. And we can take it away, speakers. Remember to unmute yourselves, please.
There we go. Okay. Hi, I'm Frederick Painter. And as Kate said, thank you very much, Kate, that I am the communications director for KnowCAFOs Incorporated. And we're a 501c4 educational corporation. And our mission sets out to kind of explain to people what the truth and consequences of concentrated animal feeding operations are. Those are CAFOs. We have a nice website at knowcafos.org, and that's KNOW CAFOs.org. And on that website, you would find from local news feeds that keep people updated here locally and around actually the world, since we get hits from China as well, but also a lot of educational information from the CDC articles, Johns Hopkins, and so on and so forth. So I think that would be valuable to you. Well, for the last 30 years, I've taught a little college and had a law practice and worked with the Lake Association. And during that time, I've been very interested in water in particular. In fact, I did a paper during law school that was titled, "Who Owns the Water in the Great Lakes?" Turns out we do, which is very nice. But during that paper, I quoted Mark Twain saying that whiskey is for drinking and water is for fighting over. So that's where we find ourselves in Trade Lake right now. We're up in Burnett County of northwestern Wisconsin, and all of a sudden we found ourselves confronted by a permit filing from a CAFO, concentrated animal feeding operation. So both at the state level, the DNR sites, and at the Burnett County level too. Now, the CAFO is a farrowing CAFO, which means they have baby pigs, and they intend to raise 225,000 baby pigs a year on 34 acres, pumping millions of gallons of water and returning it to us, thank you, in the form of 9 million gallons of pig manure. And that will be spread over local farm fields, and that's a big concern for us. It's kind of like Duluth Superior or perhaps Eau Claire deciding to do away with their sanitary sewer system and just put it around the neighborhood, you know what I mean? So lots of people were very concerned and started coming to the township meetings. And the township, after a while, you'll learn more about this later, but the township became concerned enough to hire the Wisconsin Rural Water Association to do a study. And they did a very comprehensive study about hydrology and the geology of the site, and came up with the unfortunate fact that we only have one aquifer. So if it goes, we all go, or at least our water does. Hydrologically speaking, the water flows from here into the Trade Lake system and hence into the St. Croix River system. So both of those are deemed impaired at this point, and we feel very uncomfortable about adding any more to that. Geologically speaking, we're fairly permeable up here. And in fact, the study determined that a local township or town, I guess, Frederick, Wisconsin, lost a couple of brand new wells to standard farming practice. So they became infiltrated with nitrates and basically became unusable. So our ground really does absorb, quite a bit of water. So beyond that, after that result came in, the township decided to help fund a well testing program, which we're actually in the middle of. We went to the Center for Watershed Science and Education at the University of Wisconsin in Stevens Point, and they've been super helpful, and I would certainly recommend them. The first thing we did was take a look at what's called their the Wisconsin Well Water Quality Viewer. So this takes you right down to the township level, which will give you a real indication of what your township looks like now based on the wells that have been previously tested in your township. And it's a valuable tool, and we took a look, and a few of our wells are kind of murky. So we decided, or the township, I guess, decided to form a committee and go to the university and have them do a well testing program, which they do a lot of. They've been very helpful. They generated a lot of information for us, and their charge is $55, which is pretty nominal for 8 well tests, including things like nitrate and E. coli and pH and whatnot. So the township came around and said, hey, we've got $25 that we'll commit to that. So in all truth, the program will only cost $30 for local residents. The Lake Association, it turns out now, has come up with a little more money, which will kick in. And so we're doing it fairly inexpensively. So we started out by putting the information into the tax forms and mailed that out. And we've gotten over 100 people back already for a May test. So we're very impressed with that and hope to get a good database from which we can actually see if we have bigger issues in Trade Lake already, and perhaps prepare for our CAFO future. In any case, thank you for your time, and I'm going to turn this over to Mr. Howard Pahl. Thanks, Howie. Go ahead.
Hello, my name is Howard Pahl. Our town of Trade Lake is located in northwest Wisconsin. If you look at the western border of Wisconsin, it looks like the side view of a face. We are the base of the nose. That puts us in southwestern Burnett County. Burnett County's landscape was formed by glacial Lake Grantsburg. As the last glacier receded and melted 10,000 years ago, what remains is called glacial till. Our area consists of clay and sand, and with some boulders mixed in. It also left behind 500 named and unnamed lakes in the county. We have 10 major riverways and 2 flowages. This amounts to 43,022 acres of water, which is 7.6% of the county's area. 71% of the county's land is forest and open space. Much of this is governmental land, state, federal, and county. It is part of the Northwest Sands ecological landscape. This is part of a 1,900 square mile area of rare and globally imperiled natural community that extends from northern Polk County to southern Bayfield County. The total acres of forest and open space in Burnett County is 401,970 acres. With all the lakes and open lands and forests in Burnett County, it provides many opportunities such as fishing, hunting, hiking, cross-country skiing, biking, just to name a few. All this is 2 hours or less for most parts of the Twin Cities. It is no surprise that 51% of our properties are recreational. Burnett County also has an agricultural base of 62,055 acres. That's 19,033 acres more than the acreage of water. The town of Trade Lake has 8,718 acres of agricultural land and is located right next to the state wildlife area. The wildlife area is 1.5 miles from the proposed hog CAFO and the land where 10 million gallons of manure would be spread. The farmland surrounding the proposed CAFO site is shown on the Burnett County groundwater contamination susceptibility map as being more susceptible. This is the highest rating on the key. The water table in our county is quite high. 80% of it is 25 feet or less. If the hog CAFO were to come into our area, it is possible that it would endanger the St. Croix National Scenic Riverway. This section of the riverway has 90 threatened and endangered species. From the confluence of the St. Croix and Nemacoggin River to the mouth of Wolf Creek, it is listed as one of the most pristine sections of river of all the rivers in the Midwest. The lower St. Croix at the present time is having issues with water quality. By working hard together, we can keep our river clean and flowing. All the information presented here is from the Wisconsin's DNR Glacial Lake Grantsburg's 30-year plan and from reports by the Burnett County Land Office. Thank you. Ramona's up next.
Thank you, Howie. Good morning. My name is Ramona Moody, and I want to talk to you a little bit about how a typical resident can get involved in the process of deciding whether a CAFO, concentrated animal feeding operation, should be able to locate in your area, and if it does, what regulations can be implemented to make an industrial animal operation not cause significant damage to the residents' health and environment or the property values. I was born and raised in Burnett County. More than 30 years ago, Dean, my husband, and I bought a home in the town of Trade Lake. We have 6 acres. We occasionally have livestock, and we use some of our acreage for pasture land, gardening, and recently my husband built a solar panel array. I work as a real estate agent, and Dean is a technician for a local company. Prior to the spring of 2019, I had no idea what a CAFO was, much less all of the potential harm they can cause. I was relatively unfamiliar with how local government works. A number of years ago, Dean and I were talking about government, and we decided we would attend our local town board meetings to get a better idea of exactly how our town worked. So that was my life before the spring of 2019. In April 2019, residents of Trade Lake became aware of an Iowa-owned company, Cumberland LLC, wanting to locate a 26,000 hog CAFO right next door to our property. The town residents had a meeting and overwhelmingly expressed their opposition to the industrial operation locating in our small town. During the meeting, we were told by the chairman of the town board and a representative of Cumberland LLC that there was nothing we could do about it and that it was already a done deal. We took that with a grain of salt because we found out that the chairman of the town board was the one selling the property to the CAFO farrowing facility, and his family also had been promised free manure fertilizer, adding value to his family in the excess of $42,000 per year. A group of the residents got together and formed KnowCAFOs.org. One of the group members, which you heard from, Rick Painter, is a retired attorney, and he created a nonprofit corporation for us to operate under. Primarily, we are an educational organization whose goal is to provide the public with information regarding CAFOs and how residents can get involved in the direction of where they can locate and how they are regulated. What we quickly learned was that the vast majority of the residents in Trade Lake didn't want a hog CAFO within its borders. CAFOs can do tremendous damage to the environment, the health of residents, and to our local property values. And during the Burnett County Large-Scale Livestock Study Committee, they had referred to the possible rezoning of areas in our county. These zonings would be, they referred to as sacrifice zones, where an unlimited number of animal units could be placed. So what can a bunch of residents do? It appears that Wisconsin law favors industrial operations in these scenarios. And we were told over and over again that there was nothing we could do. Fortunately, we have a couple of excellent attorneys in our group who were able to cut through the manure and provide accurate interpretations of the applicable statute and case law. So our first thought was that we needed to make sure the local residents are aware of the facts surrounding the proposed CAFO. Not surprisingly, the CAFO was not interested in publicity. We recognized that a large percentage of landowners in Trade Lake and Burnett County are seasonal. So they do not have good connection to local events between October and April. So how do we make them aware, as well as the local population, of what is going on? Well, we wrote letters to the editor. We had a bunch of lawn signs that people posted around the county. We paid for billboards highlighting the issues. We participated in in-person and online discussion regarding CAFOs. Media sources contacted us to obtain information and expose the issues. We aligned ourselves with other interested organizations, such as the St. Croix River Association. We appeared at county board meetings and also at town board meetings, and we encouraged others to do so as well. We pushed the county to impose a moratorium on applications for CAFOs so that the issues surrounding their operations could be researched. We pushed for the town to impose both a moratorium on CAFO applications and a comprehensive ordinance for operations that would provide sufficient safeguards to protect the health and safety of the residents, the environment, and property values. We also worked with the town to create such an ordinance. Personally, I have pretty much read everything I could find on CAFOs, and there is a lot of information out there. My husband and I are two plaintiffs in a lawsuit that have to, for the current chairman to be removed from the town board from his position for alleged violations of the Wisconsin Code of Conduct for government officials. I got elected to the Burnett County Board so I could have direct input in decisions regarding the county's treatment of industrial animal operations and to speak for the public on this and other issues. I am now running for the position for the chair of the town of Trade Lake for the same reasons. I thank you for your time, and I will take questions after Andy Marshall speaks.
Good morning, everyone. I'm going to share my screen here. So what I'd like to talk about a little bit is, number one, why CAFOs are potentially an issue for Trade Lake and surrounding areas, and then what the town of Trade Lake has done in order to address the potential concerns. Most people's introduction to CAFO, concentrated animal feeding operation, is just the smell, driving through Iowa or some other area where CAFOs are prevalent, and miles away you can start to smell the CAFO. And it's significant to think about what that smell is, because the smell is not just an odor. It's actually a complex mixture of ammonia and hydrogen sulfide and carbon dioxide, as well as volatile and semi-volatile organic compounds. So what does that mean on a practical level? What you're smelling when you smell a CAFO, like a hog CAFO, which is being proposed for Trade Lake, is actually chemicals like ammonia, which can be a respiratory irritant and can cause chemical burns to the respiratory tract, to skin and eyes, and can cause severe cough and chronic lung disease. You're smelling hydrogen sulfide, which can cause inflammation of the moist membranes of the eyes and the respiratory tract, and can cause olfactory neuron loss and even death in insufficient quantities. Methane, which is not so much of a health risk, but it is a greenhouse gas and it contributes to climate change. And also some of the smell that you have is the particulate matter that gets put up into the air from bedding or from decomposition of materials, and that can cause chronic bronchitis, chronic respiratory symptoms, decline in lung function, and organic dust toxic syndrome. So in addition to the issue of air, which you smell, air pollution, why are CAFOs a potential problem? Well, first of all, we have issues with groundwater contamination and surface water contamination. And both the groundwater and surface water can be contaminated by CAFOs through runoff of land application of manure. We look at the CAFO that's looking to, seeking to locate within Trade Lake, and they have to fill out applications. They fill out an application to the state, to the DNR, that's called a WPDES application. And then they also filled out an application to Burnett County. And in those applications, the proposed CAFO, which is being offered by Cumberland LLC is the name of the entity, they estimate themselves that they're going to generate 9 million gallons of manure every year. And the way that they get rid of that manure that they generate every year is they spread it on, they're proposing to spread it on thousands of acres of local farm fields. So in addition to actual intentionally spreading it on farm fields, we can also have problems with leaching of manure from storage tanks and breaking of lines that are used to transport the manure from the farrowing facility to the fields. And when that happens, as was previously mentioned, then you get things like nitrates, phosphates, and different bacterias that can potentially leak into, seep down into the groundwater and contaminate the aquifer. And also, they run off, for example, the farm fields, and they run into the ditches, and the ditches lead to streams and lakes and ponds, and so you get contamination of the surface waters. We talked about already diminution of air quality, but in addition to that, we have the potential for greenhouse gas emission. CAFOs emit greenhouse gases, and globally, livestock operations are responsible for approximately 18% of greenhouse gas production and over 7% of greenhouse gas emissions in the United States. Manure emits methane and nitrous oxide, which are 23 and 300 times more potent as greenhouse gases than carbon dioxide. In addition to the odors, we also have an issue with insect vectors. So what does that mean? Insect vectors are transmission of certain things like bacteria or diseases through insects. And CAFOs and their waste can be breeding grounds for insect vectors. Houseflies, stable flies, and mosquitoes are the most common insects associated with CAFOs. And for example, houseflies breed in manure, while stable flies and other flies breed in the decaying organic material such as livestock bedding and decaying livestock corpses. In the case of the proposed Cumberland LLC CAFO, they themselves estimate that they're going to generate 31,400 pounds of pig carcasses every year. And finally, one of the potential risks of CAFOs is, there's also an issue of pathogens and antibiotics. Pathogens are parasites, bacterium, or viruses that are capable of causing disease or infection in animals or in humans. And the major source of pathogens from a CAFO, of course, is the animal manure. And in that manure, there are over 150 pathogens that can impact human health. Most people, healthy people who are exposed to those pathogens would recover, but those who have weak immune systems are at risk for severe illness or death. The next issue is antibiotics. Antibiotics are commonly administered to CAFOs, and 70% of all antibiotics used in the United States every year are given to beef, cattle, hogs, and chicken. One of the issues is that nearly half of the antibiotics used for livestock are identical to antibiotics used for humans. And there's strong evidence that the use of antibiotics in animal feed is contributing to an increase in antibiotic-resistant microbes and causing antibiotics to be less effective for humans. And the reason for that is that the antibiotics are not fully metabolized by animals, and they can be present then in the manure. The manure gets spread, for example, in the farm fields and our water system, and that causes bacteria that are resistant to that to proliferate, while bacteria that aren't resistant to the antibiotics pass away, and it causes the proliferation of the resistant bacteria. And then finally, we're left with the issue of property values. It's clear that CAFOs negatively affect property values. One study shows that property values decline in a range of 6.6% within 3 miles of a CAFO, all the way up to 88% decrease in value within 1/10 of a mile of a CAFO. So what can a small town do when it discovers that a CAFO wants to locate within its borders? There are a couple different aspects of opposition. The first is publicity. It's clear from our case that the CAFO that we're dealing with is not a big fan of publicity. And so groups that want to either regulate or oppose the location of a CAFO within the town have written letters to the editor. As Ms. Moody indicated, they've created signs and billboards to make people aware of what's going on, done interviews with news stations. They've attended and made statements at county board meetings and town boarding meetings, and even, as in Ms. Moody's situation, run for public office. There's also administrative actions that people can take. As I said, running for office would be one of them. But also some of the members of CAFOs, KnowCAFOs.org, have worked with the county to convince board members to impose a moratorium. And a moratorium would be a requirement that no additional applications, for example, for the location of a CAFO, are accepted by a county or a town until some sort of actions can be taken, for example, researching the potential adverse consequences or researching whether the town or the county has the capacity to enforce regulations that are in place or that they want to impose. In our case, we worked with the town of Trade Lake and convinced the town to hire an attorney to draft an operations regulation designed to protect the existing environmental conditions within the town and the existing property values. And we also worked with the town and the town's attorney to draft a moratorium that would give Trade Lake the opportunity to properly investigate the geology and hydrology of the area and whether risks posed by CAFOs are a concern to this particular area. We've worked with the town to generate reasonable and scientifically supportable bases for regulations in our operation. We've met with state officials such as the Attorney General and legislative representatives. We've also aligned ourselves with other organizations such as the St. Croix River Association. And finally, we also looked at the issue of legal action. What sort of legal action can be taken when dealing with a CAFO? And there's a couple of things that we looked at. And initially, what we looked at was, did the CAFO, or excuse me, would any government officials involved in the CAFO situation benefiting from their association with the CAFO? And if that was the case, was that a violation of the Wisconsin ethical rules for government officials, which is found in Wisconsin Statutes 19.59? We also looked at the CAFO side of things. Was the CAFO violating any statutes, for example, by offering free manure to the chairman of the town board? Wisconsin has a bribery statute, which is section 946.10. So we looked into whether or not that was violated. And then we also looked at the issue of whether the CAFO made false statements in any of the applications that it submitted. Some of the residents of Trade Lake ended up bringing a lawsuit against the chairman of the town board in order to have the chairman removed from his position based upon allegations that there were violations of the ethics statutes for government officials. One of the problems that we have in legal actions involving CAFOs is that there is the laws that exist right now do favor industrial agricultural operations. And one of the biggest impediments out there is Wisconsin Statutes 823.08. And 823.08 is colloquially referred to as a right to farm statute. And what it really is a protection statute for big agricultural interests. One of the things that it provides is that if the ground or the land where a CAFO is going to be located is already designated as agricultural, then a permit to open a CAFO can't be denied unless there's a substantial threat to public health or safety. So in other words, that's the sole reason that a town or a county can say the CAFO can't even locate within its borders is if it's going to cause a substantial threat to public health or safety. So for example, if a neighboring landowner can't walk out the door because the smell is so bad, but it doesn't affect their health, doesn't matter, can't bring an action. If a neighboring landowner finds out that the value of their property is going to be reduced by 80% and they've lived there for 30 years, doesn't matter, can't bring an action. And the other real impediment in this lawsuit to bring a claim against a potential CAFO operation or operation that is up and running and causes a problem is that if the CAFO wins, so say a landowner sues because, hey, I can't walk out my door, smells too bad, plus I don't feel really well, so I think that maybe it's having a health impact on me as well. If the landowner brings the lawsuit and loses, the CAFO can recover against that landowner all of the attorney's fees that it expended in defending the lawsuit, which is a huge impediment to anyone bringing a lawsuit against a CAFO. And that's a one-way attorney's fee provision. So if the landowner wins, they don't get their legal fees back. It's only if the CAFO wins that they get their legal fees. And the other impediment, I think, to trying to keep a CAFO out of any particular area is Wisconsin's livestock facility siting and expansion law, which is Wisconsin Statutes 93.90. And the statute is kind of phrased in the negative because basically it says that a local governmental subunit may not disapprove or prohibit a livestock facility siting. So in other words, you can't say they can't come in to our town or our county unless there is a ordinance or a requirement that's drafted before the applicant files an application. So before the CAFO comes in and files an application to locate within the town, for example, and the requirements in the ordinance that are used to say you can't locate here are based upon reasonable and scientifically defensible findings of fact adopted by the political subdivision that clearly show the requirement is necessary to protect public health or safety. So again, on its face, it looks like you can't say, well, my property value is going to go down 80%, so we don't want you here. In our case, the case for the proposed CAFO in Trade Lake, residents were repeatedly told that no action can be taken because the CAFO had already filed. By the time the residents found out what was going on, an application had already been filed with the DNR. And because the application had already been filed. They were claiming that you couldn't impose a moratorium, the town couldn't, and the town could not impose additional regulations. And that raised the issue of whether an application filed by the DNR is the same as an application for approval under 9390 that would prohibit a town, for example, like Trade Lake from doing anything. And the answer to that question is no. And the reason for that, the reason we know that, is because there are certain rules that are generated pursuant to the statute to 9390. And those rules are found in what's called ATCP, that stands for Agriculture, Trade, and Consumer Protection, section 51.10. And that repeats some of the language that's in the statute about citing, but significantly it says the political subdivision can't enact standards by local ordinance before the livestock facility operator filed the application for local approval. And that for local approval is significant because, for example, if they're looking to locate in a town, the position would be local approval means town approval, not county approval, not state approval. And so based upon that, the town of Trade Lake did go ahead and enacted a moratorium and enacted some operations regulations that would apply to any potential CAFO that wants to locate within the town borders. Another kind of tool that a town or a county can use is a moratorium. A moratorium would just be a delay in or a prohibition against accepting applications until, as I mentioned before, certain things have been done, like researching what can be done to make sure that if a CAFO does locate within a county or a town that they don't do damage. And several counties, including Burnett County, have imposed moratoriums. The town of Trade Lake imposed a moratorium, but there is still some question about whether moratoriums are allowed under Wisconsin statutes. And our position has been that that they're allowed both under a county or a town's general powers to protect the health and safety of its residents. And also, if you look at 9390, it seems to state that a county or a town, someone accepting an application for location of a CAFO, has as much time as they want to decide whether they want to approve or deny the permit. And again, the language there is a little odd, but it states that except as provided in paragraph E, a political subdivision shall approve or disapprove an application for approval no more than 90 days after the day on which it notifies the applicant that the application for approval is complete. So on its face, it looks like it's saying, hey, once the application is complete, a town or a county has to take action to accept or deny a permit within 90 days. But at the beginning of that section, it says except as provided in paragraph E. So what does paragraph E say? Well, paragraph E gives a couple of exceptions to that 90-day rule. One of them is if the political subdivision needs additional information to determine whether to approve or deny the application for approval. Well, in the case of, for example, Trade Lake, we would say that we need additional time to analyze the geology, the hydrology, the potential risks of a CAFO in order to decide whether or not you can intelligently approve or deny a permit. So, and there's no time frame within the statute for that delay. So we could say we need a year and a half, whatever is appropriate. And then the last clause there says, or for other good cause specified in writing by the political subdivision. So again, a political subdivision like a town could say, we've never been faced with a CAFO before. We don't know what potential harm they can cause. So we need, 6 months, a year, whatever, in order to look at the potential issues. I mentioned before that there is an action to remove the chairman from the town board position. And through that action, we were able to conduct some discovery on the CAFO itself. And that has turned out to be kind of interesting because the application to the DNR has a requirement that it be filled out by the owner or operator of the concentrated animal feeding operation. And the last page of the application requires a certification to be signed where the signer says that he or she is an owner or corporate officer. So we were able to depose the person who filled out the application for Cumberland LLC, and they gave the following testimony under oath. Question was asked, tell me who the members of Cumberland LLC are. Answer, I can't. Why can't you? Because I don't know. Are you a member? And a member in an LLC is an owner. Are you a member? No. So you don't have an ownership interest in Cumberland LLC. Answer, not currently. Have you ever had an interest? Have you ever had an ownership interest? No. And you aren't a corporate officer, right? Answer, I don't know if we got corporate officers in an LLC, do we? I don't think so. I don't think so. We don't have corporate officers in a limited liability corporation. Question, you're not a corporate officer, correct? Answer, I'm not a corporate officer. Question, and you don't have power of attorney for Cumberland LLC, do you? Answer, nope. And what's your title or job description? Answer, I don't have one. So clearly, he's not an owner or an officer of the company, which means that the certification was violated when that application was signed and submitted to the state. In addition, this witness who filled out the application testified that he's not going to be the operator of the CAFO. He's never operated a 1,000+ animal unit CAFO and doesn't intend on being the operator in this case. We learned pretty quickly in our case that the representatives of the CAFO really had a lot of contempt for the residents of Trade Lake. They didn't feel that the residents could do anything to oppose them, and that any opposition that they offered was selfish on behalf of the residents. They offered, again, the representative of the CAFO offered the following testimony. So it was your observation after attending the April 18, 2019 meeting that there were a bunch of pricks in the community. Absolutely. Tell me what you mean by that. You guys are all selfish. When you say you guys, who are you talking about? You're included, okay? So you identified me as being one of the pricks. Who else do you think was one of the pricks there? Everybody at the meeting. Everybody at the meeting was selfish? Pretty much. So all the people that weren't selfish didn't show up? That's correct. Okay, and I'm trying to understand why you formed the opinion that, for example, someone from the town who's raising a concern about the groundwater being polluted or surface water being polluted or disease being spread or antibiotic resistant bacteria being developed, why do you think that's a selfish thing? Answer, it's an assumption. So I'm going to end with the impeccable logic that was used by the CAFO to address concerns raised by the town residents over the many potential negative aspects of a CAFO. The representative was asked, why should the town even consider having a CAFO within its borders when there's all these potential negatives? And this was the response. Controversy is something that is just, in life in generally, you have controversy, and quite honestly, everybody's talking about negatives here. I want to know, would your battery work in your car if you had all negative? No, it's an equilibrium of positives and negatives which makes your economy work. So apparently the proposed CAFO for Trade Lake is offering that they're going to provide all the negatives that we need in Trade Lake in order to balance ourselves out. Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much to Frederick, Howie, Ramona, and Andrew for such a great presentation. We're running really close to the end of our session, so it doesn't look like we will be able to take questions at this time. However, you can still feel free to post in the Q&A box, and we can try to get some of those questions answered for you personally. Otherwise, if you'd like to learn more about the CAFO work being done in the watershed, you can check out knowcafos.org for more information as well. So please note that you're going to have a short break after this to visit the exhibitor and sponsor booths and network. Your next session begins at 11:30 a.m. And then please, everyone, join me in thanking our 4 wonderful speakers. Thank you so much. And I hope that everyone has a wonderful rest of their day.
Thanks.